Do you have a loved one who's about to make the biggest mistake of their life? Every year, thousands of people enroll in art school, under the assumption that it won't be a horrific waste of time and money. But statistics show that it probably will be. Once art school has converted all their delusional aspirations into tuition fees, the graduate is faced with a few options. 88% stop making art on a professional basis within 4 years of graduating. 5% teach, 5% curate, and the remaining 2% turn to drugs, pornography, and prostitution. Or in other words, they become professional contemporary artists. In this special episode of Art vs. Reality, we're going to teach you the warning signs that someone you know is about to throw their life away by enrolling in art school.
In the beginning, there was art. Then there was religious art. Then art academies. Then art galleries. Art dealers. Art auctions. Art prizes. Art press. Art critics. Art curators. Art advisors. Art fairs. Biennales. Corporate sponsorship. Till eventually it became very difficult to find the art in the art world.
Hello, Internet. Just because I'm an art critic doesn't mean I'm not also a human being. Once upon a time, I dreamt of becoming a great artist. But those dreams are gone. But that has nothing to do with my distrust of art schools. I question the validity of art schools because the game of questioning things is all that today's art schools teach. You tell them, I want to make great art. They say, what is great? What is art? What is make? But how did art schools come to this? Let's start at the beginning.
The first recorded art schools were established around 400 BCE in Greece, where students were taught to perfect ideal forms, not as a means of individual expression, but to please and appease the gods. The Roman Empire carried this tradition towards realism, as succeeding emperors began to fancy their own divinity. It wasn't until the early Renaissance that the professionalization of art demanded larger workshops or ateliers, where master artists would teach the fundamentals of their particular craft, making the atelier a private institution of an individual artist's particular style. But in 1563, the Medicis established Europe's first art academy, and more quickly followed. In these larger institutions, the subject and style of artistic production was strictly supervised by the academy's directors. In this way, the term academic art would later become a byword for the restrictions that modern artists would try to leave behind.
During the modern era, the term academic art became a bad word. Even though most modern artists had attended art school in one form or another, they were usually loath to mention it, because modern artists were expected to teach themselves and each other in their respective isms. But at some point in the 20th century, that all started to change. Before the modern era, art's main purpose was to aid in the worship of religion and royalty. Skill and imagination were just tools for that purpose. Then artists started asking questions. Religion didn't like that, so artists started worshipping skill and imagination instead. Then we kept asking questions. Skill was the first to crumble, and imagination soon followed, leaving today's artists with nothing left to worship but a question mark. Now you might think that would be the end of art education. Not so. Business is booming because you can't teach everyone to draw, but you can teach anyone to ask a question.
It wasn't really until the 1970s that art schools began to catch up with art. Under the slogan of democratization, students were encouraged to dispense with centuries of craft that only some had the skill to master in favour of theory-based methods that were more inclusive. Post-studio critique replaced the atelier as language became the contemporary currency of art production. You can still learn skills in art school, but you might be taught by somebody like this, who likes to draw like this. You might also suggest that art schools are only following the growth of conceptualism, but they are also protecting it. In the shift back to academia, the status of art schools has never been safer, and that's exactly the way art schools would like things to stay.
Today, it almost goes without saying that a professional contemporary artist has at least a BFA, an MFA, and at best a PhD. But does all this expensive knowledge really produce better artists? Or does it only work to further entrench the preference for a certain type of art that requires a certain type of art school? So my question is this: are contemporary art schools any better than the academies of old? The academies enforced rules, whereas today's art schools enforce vagueness. But the most
Dear Peter, our apologies for the late reply. It seems that your application was temporarily misplaced, but it now gives me a great pleasure to formally extend an invitation to attend Vienna Academy of Fine Art. Might I also add that, without question, your work displays all the qualities of a great artist, and we look forward to fueling your delusions of grandeur in that regard. Sincerely, Christian Griepenkerl.